So this challenge, this workshop started with looking at this idea of Ljubljana being a city of centers. And one of the initial questions that we wanted to address at the beginning was this question of how to implement an integrated citywide strategy for the development of Ljubljana through the creation of local centers. And this idea started with when I started doing research, looking at the fact that the city center is the image of Ljubljana we have nowadays, the fact that there's the river, the castle, the attractive architecture, the clean city, cafes, culture, cultural events, all of this, but it was all related to the city center, so we started asking ourselves what's happening outside of it. So these were some of the sub-questions we started asking as well, which is this idea of identifying potential outside of the center and what these centers are and what is their relationship. So, I can't really see the color. So to start with, we ask, is the city center cultural, connected, pedestrianized, green, touristic, and is it where all the investment go? And is the periphery, the suburbs, so all of the areas that are in red outside of the city center, is it where there's no public life? Is it where there's no investment and there's poor maintenance? Is it where you can only get by car? Is it disconnected to the city center and the other parts of Ljubljana? And is it a place where there's no action? So the initial brainstorming work we did was kind of mapping out and understanding the concepts around the center and what constitutes a center and what are the potentials for it. So we looked at this idea of people, and people make places, and who are they? So is it about the residents who spend most of their time there, or is it the workers who spend part of the time, usually during the day, or the tourists who usually spend a few hours in specific places and just want to know more about an area? We also looked at this idea of historic layers and how they create the identity and the history of a place through heritage, the city development, and all these kind of historical matters. Then we looked at this idea of infrastructure, physical, social, cultural, in terms of transport. Is that what constitutes a center as well? And this idea of governance. And this is not only about a center, but actually how can governance start being implemented through all these centers. Also this idea of accessibility and who is part of it and who takes part. Is it about the right to the city and what is your role to kind of contribute to the center? And this idea of common ground, because some of these areas are very much divided. Is there a place where people come and meet? Is there a shared knowledge, shared understanding, and shared identity? So moving from there, we took this tourist map of Ljubljana, and we kind of, each of us mapped our perception of it and what these different areas could be. So for example, me as a tourist, I see Ljubljana as the city center there, and then I see Mao, which is the place where I would spend most of the time here, so that's another center for me, and then the rest is just a big periphery or a big sub-center. Then for you was more, for example, this idea of trying to figure out what these different areas were, for example, saying, oh, here nothing happens, here there's industries, here's more about Kinoshishka and the area around it. So really understanding what the city means and how we see the city from different points of view. But then what we can see here is also that this map doesn't include all of the suburbs and the periphery of Ljubljana. So in a way, it limits already your kind of perception of the city and possibilities to go beyond these boundaries. So we kind of just took a screenshot to say, actually, Ljubljana is more than this. And it's constituted a lot of centers, and we started looking at Zalog, which actually wasn't in the map, in the tourist map. And we took it as a case study to start thinking about, can Zalog become a center, and what its relationship towards the rest of the city and of the country. So our first trip to Zalog, we kind of mapped out this idea that there's a few public spaces, that there's some sorts of commercial activities all focused around a main street and this new spire that arrived there, this idea of residential, and also a few kind of civic points that are there, and they're quite interconnected. So the schools, the the youth center, and on top of the Spar, on the first floor, there's elderly centers and other kind of council offices. And then one of the interesting aspects was also this idea of Zalog being connected through transport. That was really a really strong idea for us, because that means that there is potential, and it takes only 6 to 9 minutes to kind of get there from the city of Ljubljana and the center of Ljubljana. Then just a little bit more about our visit. I don't know if you want to talk about our Zalog, our trip to Zalog.
So the next thing was the trip to Zalog. We basically we asked ourselves if Zalog is really part of Ljubljana, or can Zalog develop kind of center, as we had commented that basically Zalog has a very negative connotation in the sense of the space and place there. In these terms, we basically developed this trip in terms of these 3 kind of images. So the landmark before entering Zalog, the transition to the tunnel to Zalog, and the content which is based then later in Zalog. And in these terms, we basically was searching the things or the projects that were developed according to build a kind of publicness, to build space of meeting, like for example Plata, which is a space, which is a playground, football playground, where there was no water, there was no electricity, so there was a kind of vacant place, spot of drug dealing, and was basically with these 3 points, which was negotiated with the youth center, and the youth there transformed with them on this term of right to the water, basically bring back the water, bring the electricity, so enlighten the place and bring the stands. As Lavinia already told, the last thing is like as you can see on the down, one more back. So here we have the structure of the center, of the youth center, with which was this project collaborated, and this is basically a new structure of the Interspar, which is based on this place, which is a case of investor urbanism, which is based on the public-private partnership, and has a very strong impact as well in the community. So we came to the point that we defined which are all these negative aspects and problems in this part of the city, or maybe in this center. And first, there are a lot of divisions, so physical division with the fences, for example, church with the school, church with the division of church with the fence to the playground. There is now no access as well to the street. There is a big problem with the industry, so we have this Koto industry, which is based on the working on the manufacturing of the skin, and it has like a very strong smell and also a very big impact on the environment. There are a lot of unused abandoned buildings like silos, like wormholes, and so on. And there is a very important thing, it's like the lack of common ground. So there is no, there are big cultural, big social, national divisions within the community. And there is, of course, a lack of programs, diversity of programs and the contents in the city. And what is important is actually bringing back the collaboration to increase, in a way, the connection and put down the fences within the space.
So but we also mapped, so these were kind of the negative aspects, so we also looked at what is there and then what is positive and what can we look at in terms of what is there to create a new center. So there's lots of activities that happen. They're quite isolated, so there's not like a strong network or or a strong program around all these isolated activities. So, for example, there's a Keynote Vor. It's a cinema company that travels to different parts of the city, and they make screenings. There's this Plata Festival of Sports where people from groups from other neighborhoods come and have this sort of football and tournaments in relation to sports. There's this clothes swap, and then also there's these ladies who sing very well as well. There's like really, really interesting programs happening, but they're kind of isolated. There's also interesting spaces, this new bakery where people come and meet, they use it as a meeting space, and also the playground where children go there. And before it was actually loads of male who go there, and now actually there's also girls who use the space and they start interacting. There's, again, the space that we saw in front of the Spar, and that's a sort of public space, and we thought that public spaces and the meeting grounds are also really important to start creating a center. And there's lots of other services such as the youth center, the elderly center, a library, so all these kind of basic needs are already fulfilled, so what can we there's this idea of looking beyond that and start creating this identity and look out for other aspects that we contribute to make Zalog one of the centers of Ljubljana. And again, and also the public transport that I was talking about earlier.
We exaggerated this idea of the positive spaces of Zalog and tried to look at it as a potential that it has to offer to the wider whole that it is a part of, that is Ljubljana. But then again, Ljubljana has to benefit from Zalog as well, so we divided, Ljubljana as a big center and Zalog as a smaller. And each of these two, they benefit from each other. So Zalog could benefit from Ljubljana with some cultural events such as the Artish and this Keynote Vor event. And Ljubljana could also benefit from Zalog. Zalog has a large potential to offer. We don't actually make anything new in Zalog. We just exaggerate the existing program that it already has. One of it is these silos that stores a lot of grains. So we were trying to, just to cheaply exaggerate the program of it, just to display what's happening in silos, to, make a park of wheat growth or something like that. Then there's a river, and the nabrežje of it is not used at all. So we were thinking of making, some sports activities around that. There's a huge space on Plata that we already talked about. In front of Spar, there's a new space that is usually used by for urban sports like skaters and BMX riders. So basically, we're not trying to introduce new programs, we're just trying to exaggerate the existing ones. There's a paper factory in Zalog also. We were thinking of making a festival of origami there, or something similar to it. Just cheaply develop the program that's already existing, nothing new, just something interesting that Ljubljana could benefit from it. Basically, we saw that there's a lot of cultural and national diversity in Zalog. So we're not trying to hide it, we're trying to exaggerate it. We should promote the diversity so, the pure Slovenians of Ljubljana and the ones living in Zalog could benefit from it, and, these two groups could exchange ideas.
So this is it's a map that kind of start implementing these ideas and highlighting all of these spaces in Zalog. In this case, we can also see there's many green spaces and parks around it. So we were thinking actually, what is the potential for these green spaces and parks for the image of Zalog and for bringing people to this area, but also looking at other kind of neighboring districts and areas. So as you said, there's the paper fabric, the paper warehouse, and where people make paper, and maybe this becomes a new sort of identity of local products of Ljubljana and Zalog, and have fairs organized around it, and just kind of, this was more a graphic representation of how this could be implemented. And then again, we started talking about this question of identity, because now we're talking about different activities that could happen, but what is really important is what is the identity of Zalog. So, as we said, we looked at the river, so is it that in the future there's going to be fishing, or, you know, people go and use the river similarly as they do in the city center? There's a really strong culture of ping pong as well, and they're introducing new ping pong facility inside of the new and the spar on the first floor. Can that become something that is exaggerated and part of the culture? Then, as we said, there's lots of ex-Yugoslavian communities, and we were looking at food also. Can that become a sort of identity for Zalog? And looking at the silos and this grain industry, can we again start thinking about programs around it for identity? And there's also a hockey and an ice skating facility that can start attracting new sort of activities around the sports center. But again, one of the main questions was, okay, this is for Zalog, but what does it matter for the rest of Ljubljana? And what is really important for us is to develop this Zalog as a center where people from Ljubljana will go and people from Zalog will benefit, but also bring in Zalog outside. So in this case, one of the main aspects that are kind of crossing all sorts of centers of Ljubljana is this idea of green space. So really integrating all of them as part of a wider strategy where each of them has different sort of aspects and particularities. And also the river, it's very long. Can we start thinking of the river in different segments, but then a unified sort of element of the nature? And also these red dots, they're kind of placed in different areas, and they represent cultural centers and sort of stuff that happens around these cultural centers. And can we start thinking about linking them? And what was really important is not only about thinking about this program, but how to implement it and how this can come together. So this idea of creating a new partnership where cultural institutions, local groups, local occupiers such as shops and all these sort of small businesses, but also the municipality and these local councils, how can they all come together and kind of discuss about these things and make this plan happening? And also this idea of creating a new platform, so looking at a website, but also organizing meetings in different parts of the city where you discuss specific aspects of an area and of a neighborhood. So kind of really, how can we take this idea and move it forward and make it happen?